But we already have a question from Zion, so
Yeah.
Amy, I'd like to begin by answering that question.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Zion, I think that your question was massive. And it kind of, I think you started off by your first component of the question was to do with parental resilience. I think you made a really good point. You said life isn't like that. You know, life isn't clean and neat. We can't always be resilient. So basically, I guess we need to think about, we know when we're not doing too well, don't we? So if we're struggling, we tend to have that sense that things might be going downhill or we're not functioning at the level we want to be functioning to. That's when we need to do something about it. So whether that means we need to turn to some friends or social support or people within our church to help us, professional counselling if we're getting quite anxious ourselves or having anything, you know, that's consistent with our mood being low. How, you know, sometimes the simplest things are the best. Getting a good night's sleep and working out ways that we can try and do that. If, you know, we've got young kids, what help can we get? Exercising, eating healthily. You know, there's little things you can do like download relaxation apps. There's a great one called the Smiling at Mind, and you can download that and it sends you little exercises you as a parent or as anyone can use the app really can do to just improve your the way you're thinking, the way you're feeling, the way you're you know, behaving in certain situations to make you feel more healthy within yourself. That was the first component of your question. I think the second one was also equally as massive. And you said something like, you know, it's almost like there's been all these cultural changes, especially within the cyber world. You know, kids' sexuality, new norms. I think that's what you meant. How can we as parents keep up with this, and what are we meant to do? Now, you can correct me if I've misunderstood your question later. But basically, what I'm going to say about that is our relationship with our kids is key, because basically we can't cotton wool them, we can't save them from everything that's happening in our world. We need to be able to help them to navigate it. So if we don't have a relationship with our kids, we're not going to know what's going on in their heads, and therefore we're in a bit of trouble. Now, not all of us can have perfect relationships with our children who are going to come home and tell us about their friendships, about what's going on at school, about what the teacher said that they were confused about. But if we don't have that relationship, we can think creatively about someone who can to step into that role. So an aunt, an uncle, a youth group leader, an older mentor person within church. The idea of relationship makes a lot of parents uncomfortable because it's not something hard and fast that you can do to help our kids navigate these challenges. It's quite intangible, but staying connected as well to the kids' schools, sport groups, their communities that they're in, so that you know the kind of things that are culturally coming up consistently for our children that they're grappling with. And then we're, hand in hand with our kids, navigating the challenges. And of course, you have to have some boundaries with things like, you know, screen time, for example. You might have like software that stops your kids from being able to access certain sites. So you have those parameters for your children, but when the parameters don't work because life is just life and culture is just there, the relationship is your biggest tool to helping your kids stay resilient. So I hope that answers your question. You can feel free to answer more. So Mike, should I just go from like pick one, or do you want to read out one for me? Or
Yep. Someone has liked the top one. So I just want to remind people you can like the ones that you also would like to have answered, and that way we'll try and answer those ones first.
Yep. So that you wanted me to answer the top one. How can we support our kids who experience anxiety going to school? Yeah, that's actually a massive one. I think the biggest one for a lot of kids is making sure they're prepared. So a lot of our kids will do anything to drag their feet of a morning if their school bags are packed, their uniforms there lined up, their lunch is ready, that you've kind of got less time where they can dig their heels in and say, I'm not going. I think talking to the school is super key. So is there a pastoral care worker, their teacher, a mentor teacher who you can share some of these issues with so they can help you in it? Because if it's just you at home pulling your hair out, you know, you're not going to make a lot of headway. I think as well, talking to your kids about what exactly are you afraid of? What exactly are you anxious about? So the same thing when I was talking about how do we identify our negative thinking? If we can't identify it, we can't then turn it around. So are they nervous about friendships and fitting in again? Are they nervous because they're behind on schoolwork? Are they nervous because they don't want to leave mum because they've been at home with mum? So what is it? And then you can work with those thoughts, either providing some alternatives that are more realistic and helpful, or working through detective thinking with them as a strategy to reduce that anxiety enough to get them to school. And yeah, so for some kids who are really badly school refusing, using a stepladder approach where, you know, just say they've refused to go for 3 days, you might say on the 4th day, right, with some help from school, right, you're going to go, but just till recess. So it's that bite-sized chunk, that stepladder approach where we do something small that's agreed upon and we build up day after day until they're back full days at school. I don't think it looks as bad there with your question. So I hope that's helpful. Next question. So the one about online, how do we encourage our children to monitor their online activities? Basically, starting early is important. So the stronger boundaries you put around younger children, you know, they're not going to expect anything different as they get older. When they get to a certain age and then they've been given a lot of freedom, it's harder to rope them back in. What we do want to do is have those boundaries around what they're able to get on and view, and around screen time. So we might have our Wi-Fi timeout at a certain time of night, or you know, if that's too difficult, their devices go away at a certain time of night. So there's a time frame around it. I think with social media, they shouldn't even have an account of social media until I think it's 11 or 12. They can have a Facebook one. There's different ages for each one, but giving them something else to do it's never going to be equally as enticing. Social media is pretty powerful. They want to be on it all the time. But, you know, if they're not on TikTok, what else is going to be fun for them to do? Are they into baking? Is there something creative they can do? If we haven't given them another alternative that's appealing when they're at home, either an inside or outside activity, why are they going to get off social media? So we have to kind of have some alternatives. I hope that's helpful. How do you make a decision about where to start on the anxiety ladder? Okay, so you want to talk with your child about how they would rate their anxiety for each step. So you might think it's an 8, but they might think it's a 2, or vice versa. You always want to start at something a 3 or below. Now, some children may not be able to get a step in every anxiety scale from 1 to 10. They might have 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, if that makes sense, in the steps. So anything a 3 or below, you never want to start at anything a 4 or higher. So if you've been able to come up with a decision around what is the fear at a level 1 or a level 2, start there. But if it's 3 or below. I love that my child is really empathetic and kind. However, it does mean emotional movies can be very distressing. What will be a helpful stepladder plan? Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. I guess as well, you want to make sure you're not going too much with something that's distressing. So you want to kind of respect your child and where they're at. But I think what you're saying is probably the smallest shows make them quite distressed, which would be at their level to be watching at this point in time. I think, again, it's hard to know without examples of what shows exactly you mean, but maybe watching a scene from a show rather than a whole movie, if you know it's got content that is quite distressing, that would be a helpful stepladder approach. So if that's a bite-sized chunk of like a 2 or 3 of anxiety, rather than watching a whole, half an hour segment, which might be a 10 of anxiety, that's a way to start. And also, of course, choosing different kinds of shows. So what content is less emotionally distressing for your child, and starting there.
Just a reminder, you can put it on speaker view so you can see Amy and see the questions side by side, just in case you haven't done that yet.
So the link for, okay, the app is Smiling Mind. Smiling as in smiling mind. And I can definitely pass those details on as well if you have trouble finding it. Okay, a lot of my child's worries seem to come back to feeling that they might not see me again. What can I say or do to address this? Yes, that's separation anxiety. So sometimes that can just be because the child is a little bit anxious in general, sensitive in general, or it can be that they've had an experience of getting lost, for example, in a shopping centre. I've had some kids who are like that. What can you say or do to address this? Again, it would be reassuring them that you're always going to come back, and then giving them small opportunities to learn that mum does always come back, or dad. I'm not sure if I read that right. So basically, going out for 10 minutes and coming back, going out for half an hour and coming back. So those bite-sized chunks where they hopefully realise, or if it's 1 minute and then coming back, or the next room might be the small step. So it's knowing your child and breaking that down for them, giving them an opportunity to learn, okay, mum's okay, she's going to come back, it's all good. Okay, so boys are different in how they cope with worries. They are generally non-verbal. Do you have any tips with boys? That's so right. And they often cope with worries, not only non-verbally, but with anger. I don't know if you've noticed that, because anger is a secondary emotion, and often underlying that is sadness or anxiety. And that's how men deal with it a lot of the time, and it starts in boyhood. I think, though, boys are non-verbal, but I've actually had some excellent results talking about detective thinking with young boys, in year 7 boys particular, but even younger, and also older boys. If they're non-verbal, I give them something to read. So, for example, if you go on to one of the books, the Ron Rapay one about helping your anxious child, has some great ways of talking with your child, but also handouts that you can print out and just say, oh, look, I know that sometimes you might get worried about school or friendships or whatever it is for your son, and then giving them that to read in their own time. And some of the worksheets actually have activities for your child to do. That would be good, I think. The other thing is, you take the stuff off, take the worry out of them and onto yourself. So you start talking about something you're worried about and how you're coping with it. So I'm really worried about, learning to swim, but I'm going to start, by going to the pool and getting some swimming lessons, or being in the shallow end, and then I'd go to the ocean. So you kind of, that's a really stupid example, mind you, but you're talking about your own self and how you're managing your worries and coping with them. Do you talk to a friend? Do you, write in a journal? That's not a very boy thing to do, but you can very much express that just talking about your day or your week, and your boy will hear that and take it all in, even if he never says anything. So next one,
we probably have time for just like one more, or if you want to answer them both really quickly.
Yep. With kids that are just not obeying, rewards and consequences are really, really powerful. So if you can find, and rewards are much more powerful than consequences. So the minute they do obey, or it's even a slight obedience, you want to go over the top with your verbal praise, and maybe even small rewards. And if they're just not obeying, you really do want the consequences. So things like time out, a minute for each year of age with your child, and whatever else is important to them. So things like taking their iPad away at certain times, and you're going to have to cop the tantrum and the screaming. A lot of us take the path of least resistance, myself included, but there's no way around it except for sometimes loud complaining if they're used to being able to get their own way. Next one, there are VPNs, which means they can bypass any restrictions on the Wi-Fi. Do you know of any device or software that actually blocks the access to the device? You know what? I don't. The main ones that I deal with are things like Net Nanny, and you'd have to talk to an IT person to really cover all the bases. The other thing is, some good high schools that I've worked with have very good systems on their that manage what kids are viewing on their school laptops. And if you have anybody like that at your school, if your child's in high school, I would be asking them. But yeah, if not, an IT person that would be able to answer that question.
Great. Well, I think we're reaching towards the end of our time, and looks like we've managed to get through all of our questions, which is great. So thank you so much for so many great questions, and Amy, for all your really fantastic